Welcome to the First Things First podcast. And first things first, we need you to subscribe and leave comments letting us know what you think of the show. We're listening. I'm Nick Wright, joined by two of my favorite people, Jenna Wolfe, Chris Carter. Now, let's get the show started.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolfe. This, as always, is Nick Wright. That is Chris Broussard, who is in for Chris Carter, who is not in this week. And we love having you here. Thank you so much.
I love being here. Had a ball yesterday.
Yesterday was a ton of fun. You were outstanding. And one of the reasons I like having Chris Broussard here, we always miss Chris Carter, but when he's out, having you in, is people forget that before you were NBA insider Chris Broussard, you were generalist. You covered everything. You covered everything. Newspaper, on TV. You did this type of
Baseball,
show often.
A little bit of football.
Nice.
And so this allows you to exercise little different parts of your brain. So it's fun. I thought yesterday was great.
I love
keep me on my toes.
He does.
Sure.
And he said the word exercise. So I feel like he just looped me in as well. So thank you so much.
Problem.
That's amazing. All right, we're going to start today with the fall herd around the world. By now, this play, remember where Warriors bad boy Zaza Pachulia falls, drops, lands on Russell Westbrook's legs? It's been seen everywhere, including the league offices. Was it dirty? Nick Wright says yes. The NBA said no. Turns out the league will not discipline Zaza for the incident, saying they had a difficult time showing intent. I can only imagine your thoughts, but I will ask for them anyway. Nick, your thoughts?
I'm shocked by this. I think you're shocked by this. While I maybe wanted a harsher punishment than you did, we were unanimous. You, me, Sarah Kustok, who was here yesterday, Jenna, that is not the way a regular human being falls. And that while falling, aiming your, I guess it was his left hand for Russell's crotch, and then letting the entire brunt of his weight fall on Russell's lower legs was obviously intentional. And that's even before we get into the long, grotesque track record of Zaza Pachulia. The NBA typically gets these things right. They got this wrong. And I will go a step further on this, which is last night when the Warriors were playing the New York Knicks, a Knicks team that since they lost Kristaps Porzingis has been basically one of the tanking teams. They just have too many wins to actually get in the tanking conversation. The Warriors could have punished him on their own. The Warriors could have said, Zaza, you're not playing tonight. And they opted against it. I am shocked that the NBA, Kyrie Irving said it's got to stop. Russ said it's got to stop.
Damian
Lillard. Like, the stars of your league look at this guy as a menace. And the NBA typically is great on things like this. I knew that the NBA wasn't going to kick him out of the league. I didn't ask them to kick him out of the league. I was hopeful.
You wanted the Warriors to kick him out of the league.
I wanted the Warriors to have a conversation about, do we actually need this guy on our team? But I knew likely that wouldn't happen. But I am very surprised that the NBA didn't fine him or suspend him for taking a dirty cheap shot at the reigning MVP.
I'm a bit surprised. I wouldn't say shocked, but like you said yesterday, we talked about it. I thought he'd get a one-game suspension. I thought that was deserved because to me, he just fell on purpose. He didn't have to fall. He didn't lose his balance. He didn't get tripped. Now, the NBA and some other players, Kevin Durant mentioned it, they thought Nick Young tripped him. Now, it's hard for me to tell. Like I said, I thought he fell on his own. But if the league believes and they felt they saw evidence that Nick Young tripped him, I get where they're coming from because every time a guy falls, even if he has a reputation as a dirty player, you can't just fine him or suspend him.
Let me ask you this, because all of us have tripped. All of us have fallen down when we didn't mean to. And all of us who aren't pro athletes are able to brace our fall, are able to, assuming you didn't just get hit by a car. Like, if you're walking across the street and you trip on the sidewalk and there's a puddle in front of you, even while falling, you can avoid it. Even if Nick Young led to the beginning of his tumbling, if you will, his hand placement and his body placement were not that of someone trying to avoid Russell Westbrook. It was someone trying to hurt Russell Westbrook.
Well, was he trying to hurt Russell Westbrook? I'm not going to say that. Was he trying to make Westbrook feel him and put a little pain to him? Yeah, but that happens in professional sports. I was talking with a Warriors player yesterday, texting with one, and they don't have a problem with Zaza. They feel like, look, stuff happens in this league. This is a contact sport. To single out Zaza Pachulia, because we were speculating maybe the players need to talk to him. They're like, about what? This happens in the NBA. And let me say this, because we talked yesterday, you felt like Zaza doesn't even deserve to be in the league. He's reputed as one of the dirty players in the league. But in 2016, the LA Times, Los Angeles Times, did a survey of head coaches, assistant coaches, and players. Not all of them, only about 24. Zaza was not even mentioned in the top 5 of dirtiest players. It was Matthew Dellavedova, Steven Adams of Oklahoma City, Andrew Bogut, Matt Barnes, and Serge Ibaka.
Who was Bogut playing for that year? Oh, that was when he was
2016 was with the Warriors. But so you think the Warriors are a dirty team?
No. I think when you have a finesse shooting kind of maybe softer backcourt, it helps to have this type of guy as your center. But the Pachulia, I also wonder, again, you mentioned the small sample size also. I think, was that the year? Was he with the Hawks then or the Bucks? He wasn't.
2016.
Pachulia, he wasn't a super relevant
But he's been
player.
In the league
a long time. Listen, he's been in the league over a decade.
Well, it's also a little surprising that the NBA didn't factor in past behavior at all when making this decision. They literally looked at just this play clearly as an isolated incident and said, well, I guess it's hard to see intent. Doesn't that surprise you just a little bit?
The whole thing surprised me. In 2016, Pachulia was with the Mavs, not that he had been with the Hawks and Bucks prior to that. Here is the other thing that not only surprises me, but I want to make a distinction. Because I heard my good friend, our good friend Colin Cowherd say this. I heard other people say, you alluded to it as well. We've had Bill Lambiers. We've had John Sallies. Bruce Bowen, I'm going to not include in the category I'm about to talk about. Because there is a difference between guys who commit hard fouls and guys who take cheap shots. If Russ was in the air, right, and you want to meet him in the contest and knock him down, that is part of basketball. That is an intimidating factor, and that is a physicality that guys know come the cost of doing business in the league.
Although guys do feel like undercutting a player is incredibly dirty.
Right, and I'm not talking about undercutting. I'm talking about the hard foul where you come down hard on the guy. We know that that's part of the game, and I'm not trying to remove that from the game. But Pachulia's stuff, hitting a guy when he's prone on the ground. Look at the ball in the still image. Steph Curry's at half court with the basketball by the time this happens. Like the things that he did to Kawhi, the thing he did to Kawhi Leonard, where guys are truly defenseless, is so different than having a guy where listen, you come to the rim, you're going to be met with some force. Like, I draw an enormous distinction between that. But people talk about Lambeer's clothesline. Again, that was a very dirty play, but that's a guy going to the basket.
But Lambeer also, or Robert Parrish, went up behind Lambeer and punched him from behind because of how dirty Bill Lambeer was. But also, look, I don't think Bruce Bowen is a dirty player, but most people did think he was a dirty player. And here's where the hypocrisy comes in. If you have that player on your team, you like it. If he's an opponent, you don't like it. We saw Greg Popovich absolutely go off on Zaza Pachulia last year when he injured Kawhi Leonard for running out under him after he took a jump shot. Bruce Bowen used to do the same thing. And Popovich defended it when the league went at Bowen. They defended it. So my point is, the Warriors don't see a problem with Pachulia. I think you're singling him out unfairly when there are a lot of players that when I can get an elbow into your gut, when I can do something that is going to make you feel me and maybe intimidate you at some point, I do it. That's what a lot of players do in the NBA.
Yesterday you brought up a really good point that maybe some of the players on his own team would start taking issue with it, thinking when there is retaliation, it'll be on us and maybe not on Zaza. But you're saying you actually texted with someone who was like, we have no problem with this. They're not worried about that?
Because they feel like there are other guys from other teams doing similar stuff. Now, maybe not as egregious. I'm with you that I thought that was fake yesterday. I thought he fell on purpose and then tried to put his weight on Russ. Do I think he was trying to hurt him? permanently or injure him for the season? No. But do I think it was a dirty play? Yes. But stuff like that happens throughout the league. I just mentioned several guys that are reputed as dirtier than Zaza.
From a couple years ago, and maybe they were, and maybe it's a bit of recency bias, but when you say I'm singling him out, I'm not the only one. Russ talked about it. Kyrie Irving talked about it. Damian Lillard talked about it. Greg Popovich talked about it. Last year's MVP vote went Russ 1, Harden 2, Kawhi Leonard 3. We have now incidents with 2 of the top 3 guys from last year, were top 3 MVP candidates, where Zaza's gone out of his way to injure them.
Well, I think we don't know that he went out of his way to injure Kawhi Leonard. We don't know that. It's a 7-footer closing out. That's a play a lot of people make.
It looked like an unnatural closeout to me, and it was unnatural enough that the NBA changed the rules after, or put an emphasis on that play in particular.
That was like the tip of the iceberg. That was the last straw.
Sure. But the last point on this, and I know that this caused some controversy yesterday. I do have a problem with the general consensus just being that's what Zaza's there for. He's there to be a goon. He's there to be an enforcer. Not only do I think there's not a place for that in today's NBA because the game has changed, there's certainly not a place for it by over-the-top cheap shots when guys can't defend themselves, and there shouldn't be a place for that on a team that supposedly is the most advanced, greatest team of the era.
You want the Warriors to get rid of him. He brings value to them.
I think it is value that they shouldn't need and they don't need. And that type of player going after the types of players that he is bad for the sport at large.
Did you like when Matthew Dellavedova was
I did not. I did not defend Dellavedova. I think he was a dirty player as well. So
he shouldn't have been playing with the Cavs? That's how he's in the league.
Listen, I understand. I think Dellavedova has a slightly higher skill set than Pachulia.
Well, he's a guard compared to a center.
He can shoot a little bit. But no, I didn't like what Dellavedova did. And I didn't like, by the way, that he injured, was it Kyle Korver? With an incredible, listen, Dellavedova is a dirty player as well.
Kelly Olynyk with Kevin Love. I mean, a lot of people thought that was dirty.
It was dirty.
This stuff happened. You can't kick the dude out of the league or expect his team to get rid of him because he's done something that a lot of players
in the league do. For this play, at least, the NBA did not find anything wrong, did not find intent with what Pachulia did, and so now they will wait until, let's see if
wait till he enters another one.
Topic, the Cavs, spoiler alert. They're the new topic, the old topic. They're all the topics lately. Cleveland hosting Nets tonight. On Sunday, they fell to the Spurs. Despite 33 and 8 assists out of that guy, LeBron, Cavs offense seemed a little stagnant at times. Yes, they are 3-2 since getting the new guys, this new team sort of together. But also, yes, this offense can step it up a notch. Head coach Ty Lue's got some thoughts on that.
I thought today was a good day, a good teaching day. Was able to add some more stuff offensively because, right now with only 2 or 3 practices, we're predictable offensively, and teams was kind of sitting on them taking advantage of that. But, just continue to keep playing with pace. I think offensively, turning defense to offense. And today we added about 6 or 7 more sets out of elbows. So we just got to continue to keep, learning on the fly and just keep thinking with it every day and just keep, making sure guys are learning.
Chris, we should keep in mind, he was referring to the fact that it's not just the Cavaliers offense as a whole, but these are new guys coming together. They obviously wanted to simplify the game plan a little to get everyone on the same page. But is he right about their offense at this point?
Yeah, I mean, look, I have a few problems with the Cavs' offensive approach. I love Ty Lue, since he's taken over, has wanted to push the pace. Now that he's got some young guys, they can do that, and they can do that well. And that was one of the reasons they were in the game with San Antonio through the first 3 quarters. Mm-hmm. Great transition game, which will probably only get better.
And the guys they picked up, not only young and athletic, but the advanced metrics say some of the best transition players in the league. So it fits that style well. Go ahead.
No question. A few problems I have with the Cavaliers' offensive approach. Sometimes, and this was before they made the trades, so maybe it will stop. But you probably saw it too. Through the first 3 quarters of games, a lot of times they would have pretty good ball movement, especially for a LeBron James team where he has the ball a lot and he's ball dominant. But in the fourth quarter, I think they tend to become all LeBron all the time. Not that he's shooting all the time, but he's creating all the time.
Dictating.
And it's easy to fall into that because he's so great that you figure just let him take over. But a lot of times I think they'd be better served if there was continued the ball movement they had in the first 3 quarters and not just put it all on LeBron. One of my biggest problems, and we talked about it yesterday, I think they rely too much on the three-point shot. They're third in the league in three-point attempts. I thought their half-court offense against San Antonio on Sunday was atrocious, in part because they were hunting out the 3-ball. And you said it, what were they, 0 for 10 from 3 in the fourth quarter?
They were 0 for 10 from 3 in the fourth quarter in the loss against Washington. The starters in the loss against San Antonio were 0 for 10 from 3 for the game. The starters other than LeBron.
And those 2 losses with the new guys, 8 and 34 against Washington from 3, or 8 and 35, 8 of 35 from 3, 8 of 34 against San Antonio. Now, I have no problem with taking a lot of threes. They are a good three-point shooting team, so take them. But when the 3 is not falling, I believe they need to go more into the post. And Ty Lue said it after the game Sunday. Go more into the post or drive to the basket. They have guys, obviously LeBron, Jeff Green, Rodney Hood, Jordan Clarkson. They have guys now who don't have to say, it's three-pointer or bust. If I can't hit the 3, I can't do anything.
Well, you just touched on it. There's a lineup that I don't think we've seen much at all that would be the opposite of their three-point-centric lineup that they ended the game with on Sunday. And it's Jordan Clarkson, Rodney Hood, Jeff Green, LeBron, and Larry Nance. That is just 5 athletic guys with very little shooting out there. Rodney Hood obviously can shoot. LeBron gets hot and cold.
And Clarkson,
is hot and cold as well. But your best skill set, except for Hood, of those guys, is not shooting the basketball. But you've got some athletes out there. You've got some length out there as well. That would be a very tall lineup. 4 guys 6'8" or taller. That's a lineup we haven't seen much, if at all, since the trade. Now, again, the downside to that is, one thing that we know is LeBron likes to be on the court with shooters because it opens up the paint. He can get to the basket more. That would be less of that type of offense and more, like you're talking about, motion-oriented, passing, cut, and see if you can get layups. The best answer is probably a mixture. Like I just talked about
I agree with.
Their slashing lineup. Once Kevin Love gets back, they also could have a deadly shooters lineup of George Hill, Rodney Hood, Korver or JR, depending on who's playing well, Kevin Love, and LeBron. But maybe what the best lineup once Kevin Love gets back is a little bit of each. Hill and Hood, Love, LeBron, and Larry Nance. There you've got it. Larry Nance can do a high pick and roll and go up for alley-oops.
You got no love for JR. He hadn't been in any of your lineups.
JR actually on an individual level he's my favorite human being on the Cavs. I really like JR. Like JR personally, I really like him. He's had a good.
He's a streaky.
And he's been good for 10 days in the last year. So
he's
like
the definition of a streak.
If he gets back on hot, then he could actually be a good mixture because he can get to the rim and he can shoot threes. But right now, he hasn't been that guy.
Piggybacking off what you said, is there a sense that when the 3 doesn't drop for this team, they become LeBron-centric? They say, okay, no matter what, we're just going to go through LeBron, and he's going to sort of, whether he's driving or trying to hit, he's going to kind of will it through, which is why sometimes in the fourth quarter, when it's not happening, everything seems like it goes through him no matter what.
No, I think they tend to go that way in the fourth quarter regardless. Like, it becomes, okay, put the ball in LeBron's hands and let him make the decisions, whether they're hitting threes or not. I mean, that's their offense. And you're right, LeBron likes playing with shooters. And again, I don't want to put 5 slashers out there. My only point is when the 3 is not falling, look to something else. Look to the post. Look to having guys cut so LeBron can hit them with backdoor passes, or when he's driving, a guy's cutting, he can give him a pass when he draws a double.
Well, and if you watch the games or if you just look at the numbers, LeBron assists on 3-pointers more than any player in the league, more than even James Harden. Over the last few years, the only player who's been cumulatively ahead of him on assists on 3-pointers is James Harden. if you think about the passes LeBron makes, aside from an alley-oop to Tristan Thompson to finish at the rim, it's almost always LeBron is driving and finds an amazing, how did he wheel that pass around to a three-pointer. When we see an assist lead to a dunk for the Cavs, that assist is almost always given to LeBron James. Like, he's the one dunking it. You understand what I'm saying? Very rarely do LeBron's assists end in layups because he's the one driving, the defense is collapsing, he's hitting guys for threes. And I think what happened against San Antonio and what happened against Washington was a little chicken and the egg situation. Once LeBron came back in the game in the fourth quarter, they were three heavy. They missed them. Therefore, they got down a significant amount. It's like, okay, now we have to rely on the three. And I just think a couple shots here and there can change that. But the last 3 games, the new guys are shooting 27% from three, and they haven't adjusted, which is your point.
Moving on to Lonzo Ball. We hadn't talked about him in a while. He had a solid night in a win over the Hawks, scoring 13 points along with 7 rebounds and 5 assists. He went 4 for 4 from the field, including 3 from three-point range. Oh, guys, he made both of his free throws.
Oh, that's a big one, though.
The bar is a little low for Lonzo Ball.
Look,
what do you think?
I like what Lonzo's doing. I've said all year, if we didn't know who LeVar Ball was, if he was just a normal NBA parent and we had no idea who he was, we would be looking at Lonzo and saying, not a bad season. Not Rookie of the Year, not Donovan Mitchell, not Ben Simmons. But this guy's got potential. He's going to be good. I mean, he's 11, 7, and 7, and he's been great since he got back in the limited minutes. 6 for 9 from three-point range. I like his progression.
If he can get doesn't have to be great, just a semi-reliable three-point shot, it opens up so much more of the game for him.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons he's had trouble finishing at the rim is because guys are able to play off him because the shot had been so bad. I also think the better three-point shot will beget better free throw shooting, which was bizarrely bad early in the year from him because the rest of his game is so good. You mentioned the dad. You're right about that, but it's also what the Lakers did. The Lakers Magic didn't have to say, we're going to hang banners to Lonzo Ball. Like, think about the year he's having compared to the year De'Aaron Fox is having. He's having
Josh Jackson.
Far better season than Josh Jackson, De'Aaron Fox, and those guys don't get discussed half as much, right? And so, no, I think Lonzo's progressing nicely.
All right, finally, Suns at Pelicans. On the surface, not very interesting. Under the surface, kind of interesting. Anthony Davis scored 53 points. He grabbed 18 rebounds and blocked 5 shots. He's averaging almost 42 points in the last 6 games. That's bananas. Yes. All wins, by the way. Chris, is Anthony Davis the best big man in the league?
He's darn close. I mean, I'm a big Joel Embiid fan, maybe because I'm a little old school and I like the fact that Embiid's on the post. But Anthony Davis obviously does more at this point, if you want to call him a big man like Embiid. Phenomenal. And what's going to start getting him the attention he deserves is winning. And now they've won, as you said, 7 straight without DeMarcus Cousins. They were playing well with Cousins. I thought he and Cousins were really teaming up well and getting used to each other. I hope that's where DeMarcus ends up as a free agent. And then I want to see what these guys do. Get some shooting, some more shooting, and guards around them. Drew Holiday, Rondo have been good for them, but get a little more shooting. And I think they got the makings of a really tough team.
Let's not forget that 3 years ago, this guy finished 3rd in the MVP voting.
Yep.
I mean, he turns 25 in 2 weeks. He's still just 24 years old. Is he the best big man in the league? To me, absolutely. I think there is a pretty clear-cut top 4 players in the league: LeBron, KD, and then Steph, Harden, Steph, depending on who you like. Those are your top 4. And then he is making a case that he is the 5th best player in this league. He's going to be first-team All-NBA if you consider him at the center position. He is, to me, people might like Embiid's long-term growth potential more than his, but, I mean, his is pretty damn good as well. But right now, he's absolutely the best big man in the league. And New Orleans is 34-26. They could get the 3 seed.
The West is that tight.
Right now, Minnesota's the 3 seed. They're 38-26, so they have the same number of losses. He's doing this, and his whole career, it's been a shame. He hasn't had great point guard play, a good backcourt play. Drew Holiday's fine.
But he's been injured.
He's been injured throughout.
Yep.
And speaking of injury, Injury's been overstated for Anthony Davis. He's been injured repeatedly, but not significantly.
Yep. And in the last 2 years, he's been better, this year and last year.
And even prior to that, he was still playing over 60 games a year. So, no, I'm a big buyer on Anthony Davis. People have talked about all of the early in the year, the Celtics, they're building up trade package for Anthony Davis. They don't want to make these moves because why would New Orleans ever trade Anthony Davis? To get a draft pick to hope that maybe one day you luck into Anthony Davis? This guy's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's another first-team All-NBA to his credit probably this year. I mean, New Orleans will hold on to him to the last possible moment.
If they get, as you mentioned, a third seed or even the fourth seed, he's going to rise up in the MVP race. Now, it's going to be James Harden. We talked about that yesterday. But he could finish second.
He could finish second.
He could finish second. If they get a third seed in the West, he will finish second. I'll say it that way.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think right now he's locking himself into a top 3 finish in the MVP.
What do you get for second place in the MVP voting?
It actually, you don't get anything, but I think it does help you. Hold on, real quick. It helps you win one down the road. I think I think one of the reasons people are saying Harden has to win this year is because he has two second places.
I don't think so. He's so far and away been the best player.
I agree with you on that. I think if you've come close and not won it, it does like the Oscars. Like it helps you. Al Pacino.
Historically that has been the
Susan
case.
Lucci would disagree with you very much.
Karl Malone, Barkley were kind of giving,
absolutely
a little bit of
All
that.
right. I said Susan Lucci. The latest chapter in the Kawhi Leonard, the fact that you know that is even more impressive to me.
You big so
more
not
impressive.
the Oscars.
The latest in the Kawhi Leonard saga called
Oscars.
Will He or Won't He Return This Season is playing out like he might. Quick history. Last week, Greg Popovich said it was unlikely that Kawhi was going to be back. Despite being medically cleared by the Spurs training staff, he wanted a second opinion, came to New York to get it, and is now back in San Antonio, where reports are he will come back, and he's targeting March as a possible return date. Chris, what does all this say to you about the relationship between Kawhi Leonard and the Spurs at this point?
It says to me that it's repairable. And that is what you want if you're the San Antonio Spurs. There's been tension. There's no question. Kawhi Leonard feels like there was a little bit of misdiagnosis with his injury. And he also feels like the Spurs were pushing him to come back before he was ready. And his feeling is that I came back, you saw what happened. I had to stop playing after 9 games.
And that's so weird for the Spurs.
Well, here's the way that it's been described to me.
Please.
Kawhi, how you feeling today? I'm all right. You ready? You think you can get out? Nah, I'm not quite ready. Well, why don't you give it a try? Just subtle. Why don't you give it a try and see how it feels? Continuous subtle things like that where he felt like they keep saying this, let me get out there and play. But the Spurs, they had reason for it because obviously their doctors have cleared him.
He
now
was medically
outside
cleared by the
doctors have
Spurs.
cleared him.
Yeah.
And they'll tell you that Kawhi, before this injury, just throughout his history, he's been the type of guy, they haven't said it as he's soft. Obviously he's not soft, but he has always wanted to be absolutely, positively 100% before he gets out on the court.
And they've been very cautious with him prior to this. Like, take this year out of it.
And part of that's his
his
mentality.
We talk about Anthony Davis being injury prone. Kawhi Leonard, prior to this extended absence, has actually missed more games per season than Anthony Davis. And that's from some dings, but also because the Spurs have always, even as a young player, put him on a maintenance plan. They've been very careful with him. But to answer the question, what does this tell me about their relationship? I mean, it tells me that Greg Popovich's mental ploy, if I want to call it that, worked. I mean, Greg Popovich, when he said publicly, listen, I've got a date. I'm not telling you what the date is, but there's a date in mind that if Kawhi comes to me after that date and says, I'm ready to go, I'm not playing him. I think most teams would not do that. Like Jimmy Butler with the Timberwolves, he just had the meniscus surgery. He could come to them game 3 of the first round. And once he's cleared and say, I'm good to go, and they will play him in game 3. It felt to me like Kawhi's Pop was concerned that Kawhi's plan may have been, with a week or 2 left in the regular season, because he's been cleared by the doctors, that's when I'll clear myself. And Pop went out and said to everyone, that's not going to happen. And now we're hearing Kawhi say, okay, give me a couple weeks and I will be back. And so that's, to me, it's significant. And it makes Popovich's comments last week make the more sense.
Well, and look, I thought Pop's comments were right on point. I mean, if I'm a team, I have to get my team mentally ready for the playoffs. And I think you make a great point. That may be true. But he also may have been like, look, we can't sit here and wait for Kawhi to come back. All these other players, Forbes and the guys who are going to fill in for him, they have to feel like, okay, I'm going to be playing in the playoffs. That's how they're going to be at their toughest. And that's one reason Pop's always been able to just fill in with the next man. Now, is it possible that Kawhi and his camp said, okay, they're playing hardball. And here's the thing. Beyond coming back this season, they could have said, maybe the Spurs are getting so upset that they don't offer me, because this summer they can offer him the Supermax. 5 years, 217, some estimates are 219. $219 million over 5 years. They're the only team that he can get that from. That's when this is really going to come to a head. Not when Kawhi returns on the court, not in the playoffs. This summer, if the Spurs offer him that and he turns it down, he will be traded. Or if they don't offer him that says a ton as well.
One important note on that I just found this out. I didn't realize it. It was the one, I think it was Larry Kuhn pointed this out about the CBA, but I'm not certain exactly who it was. That Supermax you have to qualify for. You can qualify for it by first-team All-NBA or winning the MVP. There's a few things. If he doesn't get it offered to him this year, he has to re-qualify. So that Supermax, if he doesn't get offered to him this summer, he might not be eligible for it. Like, it's not like once you qualify for it, you're always eligible for it.
Yep.
So he's obviously not going to get any awards, anything this year. So then he would be in a position where next year he has to be first-team All-NBA, which, by the way, LeBron exists, Kevin Durant exists, Giannis exists. That's a tough spot to get it. That could cost him $50 million for a guy who, by the way, doesn't have money gets $2 million a year from his shoe deal.
So, guys, let's go ahead and assume that he does come back in March. He does make an impact on this Spurs team. Do they all of a sudden become legitimate contenders in the West? They are contenders. They always are, I think, as long as Greg Popovich is on the team. But what does it do to them? Where does it elevate them in the West?
Look, well, that you said it, in the West. I believe this wholeheartedly. With Kawhi Leonard, and darn near without him, but with him, they could beat any team in the league in a 7-game series. Not definitely would.
Any team in the East.
But period, except for Golden State. They could beat Houston. I mean, they did it last year in 6 games.
With Kawhi, you're saying?
With Kawhi. Okay. With Kawhi Leonard, they are as good as anybody in the league except Golden State. I don't think they have the athleticism to guard Golden State over the course of a 7-game series on the perimeter. Now, they can go big, which most teams can. Big. But at this stage of his career, I don't think Pau Gasol can punish you consistently enough like he used to be able to really outweigh the 3-point shot that Golden State has. And Aldridge will have some big games, but over the course of 7 games, will he punish Golden State enough to outweigh the 3-point shooting? I don't think so.
I think with a healthy Kawhi Leonard, the Spurs could. They would be, to me, a clear 4th most likely, but they could win the championship. I don't. I would have right now. I would have it Golden State, Houston, Cleveland, Spurs with Kawhi Leonard. I would have them 4th. But even without winning the championship, they could have an enormous impact on who wins the championship based on between Houston and Golden State, who gets the Spurs in round 2. That is the difference between having to face the Spurs in round 2 and what I think would be a slugfest with either one of those teams when you then have the other team waiting for you in the conference finals is enormous. We saw, again, the year the Warriors didn't win the championship. Part of that was because of the series they played before they played the Cavs. The Thunder took them 7, took everything, it took a lot out of them to come back from 3-1 down. By games 6 and 7 of that series, they seemed physically spent. I think this is enough of a concern to where it'll be very interesting if the Spurs are the 4 seed going into the final few days of the season, if Houston or Golden State would prefer the 1 or the 2 in order to avoid San Antonio in the second round. I think the Spurs with Kawhi are very dangerous.
If you meet OKC in the second round, too, I think they prefer OKC over San Antonio, but that'll be a tough one, too.
6 weeks left till the playoffs, just about?
A little bit, yeah.
I hope he's back because the West is going to be incredible.
Bananas.
It'll be fun.
You're talking about 4 elite teams, and then throw in Minnesota with our man Jimmy Butler.
you're a basketball city who wants to woo LeBron James, there are a number of ways you can do it. 1, dangle cash in front of him, like lots of 5s and 10s. 2, name your arena LeBron James House of Worship. Or 3, buy 3 billboards just outside of Cleveland. That's
Right
what you're
outside of
looking at
Cleveland.
right here. A 76ers fan with mucho dinero bought these 3. The billboards read, complete the process. Then hashtag Philly wants LeBron, and then that one, a sign with the potential starting lineup pictured on the court.
Not enough spacing there for LeBron. You have some guys out on the three-point line.
Well, they got Ben Simmons, so you know.
Nick, is Philly a legit option for LeBron minus the billboards?
I think it might be the best option for LeBron. I'm a strong believer that LeBron James will only re-sign in Cleveland if they win the championship. And
Not even if they get close.
I do. Maybe if they go 7 games, he would sign a 1-year deal. I've been led to believe the relationship with Dan Gilbert and the trust factor with Dan Gilbert is as bad as it's ever been. Now, we've never seen the best player on a championship winner leave to go to another team. Now, we've seen Jordan walk away, obviously. We've seen guys retire. But we've never seen a guy win a championship, be the best guy, and then say, I'm going somewhere else. So if they win the title, he'll stay. But then we are running out of viable options for LeBron. San Antonio's interesting because of Pop, but we don't know Kawhi's status there. And LeBron is going into year 16. He understandably is, I don't want to say worried about, but part of the focus is post-playing career. And San Antonio is not a glamorous market for any of that stuff. The Lakers do not seem close to contending to me. To me, it's Philly and Houston. And so the question that LeBron will ask himself, I would imagine, is this. What do I trust more, Joel Embiid's health or Chris Paul's age? Like that to me is the question. Like, because Houston is obviously far better than Philly. But Chris Paul is in year 13. He's had a checkered injury history already. And the history, NBA history, of small guards excelling past year 14, 15, it's really John Stockton, and that's it. So there's that. And then there's Embiid, who's played almost the same number of minutes in his career as LeBron's played this year. So that's a big question mark as well. I like the upside of Philly. I like the long-term future of Philly, but that's assuming a big assumption, which is Joel Embiid's health.
Look, Philly certainly has to be in strong consideration. I'm of the impression that, or the opinion, that if LeBron and the Cavs get to the finals and play the Warriors tough, competitively, a tough 6-game or 7-game series, to the point where we say, oh, they're right there. Like, they got a shot at beating them next year or something. Then it might not be a bad choice just to stay. And maybe only stay for 1 year, to your point, because if you stay 1 more year, I think the free agent landscape is much better in 2019. And here's a few reasons why. Number one, you'll know more about the Lakers. You brought up the Lakers. You'll know more about Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Kyle Kuzma, how good these guys really are. And if Paul George decides to stay in Oklahoma City for 1 year, then they get to the second round again and lose. He may be ready to go with you to L.A. if he's not already this summer. Houston, you'll know more about Chris Paul's health.
But there's also a free agency class. Kawhi's a free agent a year after this. Clay's a free agent year after this. There's more viable free agents.
Well, and I think Philly, you mentioned Joel Embiid, and that's a huge question mark.
Huge.
To go to Philadelphia next year and Joel Embiid, you never know with his health. I would love to see him again next season. If he plays essentially a full year this year, then does the same next year and playing back-to-backs, then LeBron could confidently say, okay, the big guy can stay healthy, and then you got a heck of a team if you put LeBron in there. And LeBron and Simmons would work well together because Simmons, even though he's a true point guard, and I'd rather have him handling the ball, I think there are times when Simmons gets off the ball and goes in the post.
Oh, he's a great player.
LeBron obviously can play off the ball. So, yeah, they could work well together.
They're also like new BFFs, LeBron and Ben Simmons.
Ben Simmons
well,
with his agency.
LeBron's a mentor to him.
Just real quickly, what do you factor in as the most important thing he's going to deal with, LeBron? Like, what's the most important thing to him?
Winning championships. Winning championships.
So he wants to go somewhere where they can contend in the next 1 to 3 years.
And I'd say past that. I really believe LeBron wants to play an NBA game with his son. And so I think LeBron's going to play 6 seasons past this one. So I think it's, can you win titles in the next 6 years? I think that's the math.
Then he should just go to Golden State.
Go
win titles.
You're not serious.
Finally, all week, we're picking our first things first NBA midseason awards. I always have trouble with the name of the show because I only say it 47 times a morning. Today, we're talking Rookie of the Year. The nominees are Kyle Kuzma, Jason Tatum, Donovan Mitchell, and Ben Simmons. You can vote on our Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram pages, or better yet, vote on all 3. All right, Chris Broussard, I'll start with you. Who's your choice for Rookie of the Year?
Look, anyone, and I don't know if you agree with this, but anyone saying Donovan Mitchell and who votes for Donovan Mitchell, I'm not mad at you. I will not be upset because he is playing phenomenally, reminding a lot of people of a Dwayne Wade, and by himself. Now, I don't want to say by himself because you got Rudy Gobert. You got some good players there in Utah and a good coach. But he's almost got them in the playoffs in the West, and they're certainly in the hunt. 111 straight. However, it is Rookie of the Year. And Ben Simmons, we've already started judging Ben Simmons by a high standard because people, have said, well, he went in a slump the last couple months. No, he's played well the entire season. He's been 16, 17 points, 7 assists, 7 rebounds, 50% shooting. I actually want him to shoot more. Now, everybody says he can't shoot, and he can't. Can't shoot a jumper, but he can score. There's a difference. Lonzo can't shoot, but isn't really a scorer. Ben Simmons can score. He's the closest thing I've ever seen, including Penny Hardaway, to Magic Johnson because Magic didn't have a jump shot. He had a set shot, but he could score. And Ben Simmons has never dipped below like 52% shooting because he can score.
Like people are like the guy can't shoot and he can't shoot long range, but he's shooting
or even mid range.
But it's fine. But he's shooting 53% from the field. I echo all these points, and I understand Utah's on a nice winning streak. Or they were until they lost to the Rockets. I get that. However, how about this on court, off court? Philly, with Simmons on court, outscores their opponents by 5 points per 100 possessions. With him off the court, they get outscored by 3 points per 100 possessions. Why is Philly the 7th seed? Why does Philly have 32 wins? 2 guys, Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. The reason that people, I think, like the Donovan Mitchell story, even though at least to me he's been at least the slightly inferior player. My friend Chris Carter, who is a Donovan Mitchell advocate, I believe Jenna's a Donovan Mitchell advocate, is because he was drafted this year. People think Ben Simmons, it's a little unfair that he got a redshirt year. I think that plays against him because he was drafted 2 years ago.
No, not necessarily. Donovan Mitchell's averaging 19 points a game, leads all rookies.
Yep.
He's also a better shooter than Ben Simmons, a better scorer than Ben Simmons. He's the best player on his team. Ben Simmons shares that with someone else. When you guard against Utah, when you game plan against Utah, you're game planning against Donovan Mitchell. That's not necessarily always the case with Philadelphia.
Yeah, there's reasons to vote for Mitchell, but you mentioned he's a better scorer, but everything else Simmons is better at. Simmons is playing. Mitchell's more athletic, but Simmons is playing really good defense. He's obviously the better passer, the better rebounder. We mentioned his efficiency. And, look, he's leading a team into the playoffs. Now, like you said, he's got Embiid. They are in the East. But still, he's been better for the entirety of the season.
And I want to make this point clear because Jenna makes excellent and very fair points. I am not anti-Donovan Mitchell. Right. Like, I think Donovan Mitchell's great. I think he is, if you redid the draft right now, Donovan Mitchell go number 1.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, we haven't seen the number 1 pick, Markelle Fultz, and Donovan Mitchell now looks better than Lonzo Ball. It's not anti-Donovan Mitchell.
Right.
I just think Ben Simmons is a special player that's already a fringe all-star guy.
2 other things.
He could easily be an all-star.
Also averaging more fourth-quarter points, and he's got 2 first names. And I think that's something that neither of you factored in when discussing Rookie of the Year.
So does this guy. You like him? You guys got to talk about it. He's got 2 first names.
Love this story. The NFL certainly kept us all entertained thus far this offseason. Let's focus on the Chiefs for a moment. KC traded all-pro cornerback Marcus Peters to the Rams for a 4th-round pick this year and a 2nd-round one next year. The move has rubbed some Chiefs fans the wrong way, namely the one sitting to my right. Peters addressed the trade yesterday. Take a listen.
It's business.
That's it?
It's business. And all I can do is just go handle mine. You know, I thank the Kansas City Chiefs for everything they did for me to start it off. Now it's on L.A. I miss the guys, man. I miss Eric. I miss Justin.
Yeah.
I miss Coach Reed. Man, Big Red. and it's funny, man, because I'm sitting there and it's been a crazy little week, you know, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at everything and it's like, man, y'all talking about me and Big Red had issues?
So it was no issues with you and Andy Reid?
No. Big Red can come check me like my pops can come check me, and I'll take it as thank you, Big Red, because you know what? He was looking in the best interest for me to become a better player. You know, they already knew that I had some so-called character issues off the field, you know, that happened at UW, and they took me, you know, all they told me was, come on, we're gonna take it and we're going to grow together, you know, and we grew for these 3 years. It was cool, and sometimes it's just business.
Got to move on.
It's just business.
Very interesting comments, and I think really good insight into Marcus Peters. And when you listen to that, you think, well, if this was about his old issues that he had years before he had this conversation with the Chiefs, hey, we're going to work together, we're going to try to make this work, then you say, oh, you know what, the Chiefs are in the wrong, clearly, for doing this. But let me start by asking you, Nick, do you think they got enough for Marcus Peters?
Of course not. They traded Marcus Peters and a 6th-round pick for a 4th-rounder this year. So the 6th-rounder for the 4th-rounder, so you move up about 70 spots. And a 2nd-rounder next year. So you traded Marcus Peters to move up 70 spots in the middle of this draft from the 6th to the 4th, and for what will probably be the 57th, 58th pick of next year's draft. That's what you traded an all-pro corner for. That's what you traded a guy who, by a wide margin, leads the league in turnovers forced since he came into the league, interceptions since he came into the league, the guy who was your best defensive player. Why? Because he knelt during the anthem and your owner didn't like it? Why? Because he threw a flag into the stands, he got a 15-yard penalty? Why? Because the fans in Kansas City thought he liked Oakland too much? This is my hometown, but Kansas City's got some issues with athletes such as Marcus Peters. There's a reason Travis Kelce, who gets flagged more often for unsportsmanlike or taunting penalties than Peters, is embraced there, and Peters is not. And he said it there. He and Andy Reid had no problems. And he is absolutely correct. The Kansas City Chiefs have branded themselves as a team of second-chance guys. And I know Chris says we're not fans. I am a fan. I do love the Chiefs. That is the team I grew up rooting for. They have asked me to set aside some of my moral code rooting for them. We're going to draft Tyreek Hill, who we know brutally abused a woman in college, and said, we are going to ask you on Sundays to look past that not character flaw, but that major character issue, because the guy is an amazing player. We're going to stand by Kareem Hunt, who I don't know what he did or didn't do, but I know he was accused of domestic abuse a few weeks ago, because we only care about what they do on Sundays. They have asked me to do that because those guys will perform. None of those guys have performed as well as Marcus Peters. Marcus Peters has not been accused of anything like that. And they get rid of him because of character issues? They get rid of him because he argues with coaches? You knew this is the guy he was. You knew he was hyper-competitive. You knew he had a temper that could flare at coaching staff. But his players loved him. His head coach liked him. And you move on from him for a 2nd-round pick? And I'm supposed to be okay with that?
Look, there are a few things. You left out a few things. After he threw the official's flag into the stands, he ran into the locker room.
He thought he was ejected.
And took a shower and came. Whether he thought that or not, and I'm sure that's the only reason you would do it, but why'd you think that? Like, wait till you're actually ejected before you leave the game.
That's fair.
I mean, a little bit of bizarre behavior, getting in arguments with assistant coaches, which isn't the worst thing in the world. But still, if you say Andy Reid can check me, then those assistant coaches are an extension of Andy Reid. And an argument here or there is one thing, but maybe it was more than that. I don't know for sure, but I do know, and football coaches have told me, when you see stuff come out to the forefront and get reported, it's usually been going on for a long time, and there have been a lot worse issues. So, look, were they character issues or was it financial? Because, you know, now they had him locked up for, what, 2 more years?
Well, they've got him this year on a less than $2 million. Next year on the
player option, though, right?
A fifth-year team option, which would have been around $10 million, and then they could franchise him. They had him without having to give him a long-term deal. They had him under team control cheaply for 3 more seasons.
Here's the thing, Nick, though. Why do you think, because I don't believe anybody else was making a better offer than what the Rams were. This is, you said, one of the best corners in the league. Why wasn't anybody else offering more
because
than what the
if I'm
Rams did.
selling my house and I put on the for sale sign, way in over my head on the mortgage, going to give it up to the bank in a few weeks, I'm not going to get the best offer. The whole league knew they were walking away from him. The whole league knew the owner didn't like him. The whole league knew that the Chiefs, who have asked me to accept abhorrent, unforgivable behavior, can't stand this guy.
So you think, you mentioned Tyreek Hill, Kareem Hunt, their behavior, alleged behavior.
And I just want to be, Tyreek Hill, we know what he did. Kareem Hunt, we don't know. I just want to be fair to him.
But you think the owner, because he wouldn't stand for the national anthem,
I think that was a big part
that
of it.
was
Absolutely.
bigger
And the way
than
the
those
fans
domestic
reacted
violence
to it.
issues?
Say it again?
I mean, bigger than the domestic violence issues?
I think the fans in my hometown, Kansas City, have a bigger issue with what Marcus Peters did than what Tyreek Hill was accused of, than what Kareem Hunt was accused of. I do think that. The people that go to those Chiefs games that I grew up going to, that I grew up tailgating with, I do believe that.
Typically, your play, and his play has been terrific. Typically, if your play outweighs the distractions, whether character issues with the team or the fans, they will go with the player. So
typically you would.
Which means the off-field distractions had to be so massive, or the owner had to have such an issue with the kneeling, because there are other players on the team who had similar off-the-field, maybe not as bad, but similar off-the-field distractions or noise or whatever you want to call it, who there hasn't been any kind of talk of getting rid of them. My issue was a little bit more that maybe he felt like, well, they know who I am. They should cater to who I am. They know that this is the kind of guy I am. The coaches should understand that. I had no issue with Andy Reid, so everything else should have kind of been swept under the table.
Yeah, like the comment he made, and he looked like he was, maybe I'm taking it differently, but when he says they knew I had so-called character issues, well,
doesn't
be
make
a
it
professional and change and grow up.
Man,
I'm not just like, you got
and it's
character
not like it
flaws.
happened 3 years ago. It happened this season.
I get it that we would all be better off if everyone was nice to people, if everyone did everything the right way. But in every industry I've ever worked in, we have a sliding scale of rules and acceptable behavior depending on your performance. There is no question about it that whether it's media, whether it's sales.
Well, clearly, they didn't think that Marcus Peters was deserving of the position.
As great as he is. The one game he was out, Oakland, their defense actually played. Now, I'm not saying, look, the dude is great individually. But the secondary was poor with him. The one game he was out against Oakland, they actually had one of their better defensive games.
Well, then I need to personally evaluate whether or not I want to be a fan of this team. Because if they say what you've done, Marcus Peters, a nonviolent political protest, plus some arguing with coaches, which, by the way, happens in football, plus one time throwing a flag into the stands. That's beyond the pale.
You don't think anything else happened other than
I know he got into an altercation with a coach on the bus. And he was then suspended one game for it. But not enough to sever the relationship with Andy Reid. But I watched this team. I watched Travis Kelce, good old white boy Travis Kelce, who the fans adore. He can be a total clown off the field. Say I'm going to change. Pantomime committing a sexual act to a referee. Get fined for it. Say I'm going to change. Get back-to-back not personal foul, but taunting penalties. Say I'm going to change. And they give him a big contract. I can see that. Marcus Peters, the best player on the team. You can't deal with it.
I wouldn't say best player on the team.
The best player on their defense. You can argue about on the team.
It's a big threat to not be a fan of your hometown team anymore.
For who, for what? Like, I don't know what we're doing here.
Welcome back to First Things First. Chris Canty is here. You look so spring-like and
thank you.
That's a little Syracuse ensemble.
No, not Syracuse. Virginia. Wahoo Wah. We're number one in men's basketball. Get it straight. Get it straight.
Y'all winning it this year?
Listen, I'll be happy with a Final Four appearance for now. But listen, we're number one. Duke lost last night at Virginia Tech, so all is right in my world.
Nice.
I thought it was the Broncos. That's where you want Kirk Cousins going.
Come on, man. You know better than that.
I thought it was the Mets, so I was way off. Speaking of Kirk Cousins, Chris Canty, let's talk about the Vikings. According to reports, the team decided not to franchise Case Keenum despite him taking them to the NFC Championship. Vikings now have a decision to make: sign one of their 130 quarterbacks they have on staff, or maybe go after Kirk Cousins. Cousins has also been linked to said Broncos, the Jets, the Browns, but now there's reportedly mutual interest with Minnesota. So, Chris, what do you think? Would the Vikings be the perfect fit for Kirk Cousins, based on the team they have and what they know they would get out of a guy like Cousins?
Well, I think Kirk Cousins would be an upgrade at the quarterback position, and not to take a shot at Case Keenum and what he did last season. He played very well. I think from a physical tools perspective, Kirk Cousins is a better football player. You know what Kirk Cousins, he's going to give you 4,000-plus yards passing. He's going to give you 25-plus touchdowns. He's going to have a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He's going to be a solid football player, and he's somebody that you can trust if you give a big contract to. So when I look at where the Minnesota Vikings are in terms of their team and trying to make a push and win a championship, I think they've got a window of about 2 or 3 seasons that they got to capitalize on. And, Nick, I know we have a difference of opinion with this, because they got some contracts on the defensive side of the ball they're going to have to address. Anthony Barr is on a 5th-year option. Sharif Floyd, he was out this season, but somebody that they would like to keep around. But to me, that just means that you would try to get Kirk Cousins because you would have more urgency, because you understand you have a finite window to win a championship.
Well, so that is the key point. The key point is, if you go after Kirk Cousins, if you sign Kirk Cousins, it's not that your championship window is only this year, but that means you are going for it in 2018, not really worried about the future. Because it's not just those guys. Here are, of their front 7, guys that are free agents after this coming season: Sharif Floyd, Brian Robeson, Danielle Hunter, Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks. Those are 4 really outstanding players and 1 really good player. Though all of those guys, if you sign Kirk Cousins, you'll be lucky if you can bring back 2 of those 5. That's not to mention another free agent after this year is Stephon Diggs, your second-best wide receiver. So the Vikings are in a cap position where they could absolutely sign Kirk Cousins for this year. But what it means for them moving forward, and for a team that, to me, illustrated they don't have to have a $30 million quarterback to win games. They've won games with Teddy Bridgewater. They've won games with Sam Bradford. They've won games with Case Keenum. I don't know if that is where I would allocate my resources. Now, if we were talking about Drew Brees, who's a free agent quarterback, but we all know he's staying in New Orleans, I would feel differently, because he's such a difference maker. I don't think the upgrade from whichever of those 3 quarterbacks becomes your starter and Kirk Cousins is as significant as the pay discrepancy would be. And that's why this is a move that, while it would make the Vikings, to me, the favorites in 2018, I don't know that I'd make it.
I thought you made some great points, and that's true. But like you said, and you said in your last sentence, they would be the favorites in 2018. You have to go for it. This is the NFL.
Yep.
Outside of New England, Pittsburgh, a few other places, the contenders are shifting every year. And so if you're Minnesota and you have a chance now, you don't know what the future is going to bring, even with those free agents. You have to go for it. And you're right. Kirk Cousins, is he top 5 like Drew Brees? No. But I think he's significantly better than Case Keenum or Teddy Bridgewater. The seasons that they both had when Bridgewater was healthy and Keenum last year, that made everybody raise up and say, wow, they're going to be great, and Minnesota got excited. They're not close to what Cousins gives you every year that he's been a starter. So, and in Minnesota with Diggs, with Thielen, with that running game, Dalvin Cook is coming back. I don't think it's out of the question that he could throw for close to 5,000 yards.
No, I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility either. I think you can see a jump in production for Kirk Cousins and what he does on the field. But, Nick, you said something. You said you don't think that Kirk Cousins is that much of an upgrade in talent at the quarterback position than Case Keenum. Well, I think the Minnesota Vikings brass, Rick Spielman and their coaching staff, Mike Zimmer and company, would disagree with that. They're telling you that we don't believe that Case Keenum is worth $23 million on a franchise tag.
Oh, I don't think he is either.
But okay, so we understand the market for Case Keenum is going to be below that number, but we also know that the market for Kirk Cousins is going to be upwards of $30 million a year in an average annual value.
Agreed. But to me, I think it is. I think this year was a good example that we've seen in recent NFL history and the last few years, this year in particular. There's 2 paths to having a true Super Bowl contending team. One is the no doubt Hall of Fame quarterback. The Packers with Aaron Rodgers every year, no matter who's around him. Brady every year. We saw Breeze get back to it this year. There's that path. Then there's the amazing 52 guys and just make it do with the quarterback. That, by the way, is what Philly had come the playoffs. That's what Jacksonville...
That's not fair, Nick. That's not fair.
No, what Philly had come the playoffs.
Yeah.
But Foles had to be spectacular for them to win it. If he wasn't spectacular, they're not winning it.
Just look at the Final Four teams, though. It's certainly what Minnesota had. It's certainly what Jacksonville had. A great team around in Jacksonville's case, I don't even think this, a capable quarterback. What we haven't seen, though, is what I think is what will be the Kirk Cousins model. What is the Matt Stafford model? What is the Joe Flacco model? Which is the mid-tier quarterback paid like the Hall of Fame quarterback. That team get to the Super Bowl. That team win a Super Bowl. And if you say Flacco won it, that was before he was paid like the Hall of Fame quarterback. I haven't seen that.
I totally agree with you. I think we have completely bought into the Kirk Cousins hype. Nobody was talking about Kirk. He had great numbers. Nobody was talking about Kirk Cousins as a game changer, as what our guy Eric Mangini says, a force multiplier. A quarterback you put in there, he makes everyone around him better. He's the biggest hyped, biggest name on the free agent market right now, and I think teams are bending over backwards thinking we have to have him because he's the missing piece. I don't think anybody would have thought that before this all came up, that it's got to be Kirk Cousins. Like, he's the guy that's going to make a difference. Look what Minnesota did with a guy like Case Keenum. They had a great team in place. CeCe talks about this system that they had in place. They plugged in a guy. It could have been Sam Bradford if he stayed healthy. Probably could have been Teddy Bridgewater if he stayed healthy. And look how far they were able to go.
Yeah, but they didn't accomplish the ultimate goal. Right. They were 60 minutes away from getting to a Super Bowl, and no team just wants to get there. They want to win it. And so when you start looking at a quarterback like Kirk Cousins...
Wait a minute. You don't consider what Case Keenum did for the Vikings last year completely, absolutely successful
listen,
season?
I think the Minnesota Vikings coaching staff in their front office are telling us Case Keenum got there in large part because of the supporting cast, not necessarily just because of his play. And I'm not saying that he wasn't good, but can he replicate that? You can't ignore the first 5 years of his career. And so I think there's a little bit of a hesitancy to commit that kind of money to Case Keenum. Kirk Cousins is clearly an upgrade at the position. In his 3 full years as a starter with the Washington Redskins, he's 24, 23-1. He's won a division title in the NFC East. So when you start talking about being able to compete for a championship, I think Kirk Cousins can make the plays that you need your quarterback to from the pocket and get your team to the big game.
There's no question Cousins is an upgrade, at least to me, no question, on Case Keenum. And there's no question either to me that they're right in not giving Case Keenum $23 million a year. If you ask me, would I rather have Cousins for 30 or Keenum for 23, I'd rather have Cousins for 30. But would I rather have Teddy Bridgewater still on his rookie contract? Would I rather have Keenum at $8 million a year? Would I rather be able to hold on to my salary cap space when I've seen that I can get to this close, or I can get to the Final Four, I should say, with that team around him? That's what I'm saying. It's not that I think these guys are better than Kirk. It's that I know that some people don't care about the salary cap as much as I do. It's a hard cap sport. And a dollar spent here is dollar you can't spend here. And when you look at Stephon Diggs, Sharif Floyd, Donnell Hunter, Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks, all coming up on free agency, you're going to figure out what Vikings team are we actually going to have a couple years from now if you give Kirk Cousins that money. Now that the NBA season is heating up, I wanted to talk about another podcast we do at Fox Sports, and that's Chris Broussard's In the Zone. Each week, Chris breaks down what's trending in the NBA and the biggest names in the league. Previous guests include Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Shaq, John Wall, and myself. So if you love the NBA, make sure to subscribe to In the Zone wherever you get your podcasts.
Chris Canty is back with us. He's going to say some words pretty soon. More on the Cowboys' Dez Bryant contract showdown. Dez said in a radio interview that he hasn't heard a word with regards to a pay cut from the Dallas Cowboys. Now, cutting Dez would save the Cowboys $12.5 million next season. Chris Canty, what do you think the Cowboys should do about Dez? Is it a Dez situation? Would you call it the Dez situation at this point?
Well, if Dez hasn't heard anything from the Cowboys in terms of what they want to do with his contract, he hadn't been listening to what Stephen Jones has had to say, because they're acknowledging that the production doesn't match the pay scale. Dez Bryant going into 2018 has the third highest cap hit at the wide receiver position at $16.5 million. Now, the Cowboys are up against it at the salary cap. They've only got about $20 to $22 million in cap space. And, oh, by the way, they've got to franchise DeMarcus Lawrence because they don't want to let him walk in free agency, not to mention the Zach Martin contract extension that they have to address this offseason as well. So the Cowboys need some flexibility. They're going to have to ask Dez Bryant to restructure to a team-friendly deal, or they're going to run the risk of potentially having to cut Dez Bryant if he doesn't agree with that. That's the situation that they're faced with. Dez Bryant has to face the reality of where he is as a player right now. He's 29 years old, but there's a lot of miles on those legs right now, and it's clear that he can't create the vertical separation in the passing game that can dictate fronts and coverages anymore. He's not that guy. Like, he's still got the ball skills. He can still make contested catches, but he's not the guy that's going to create that separation that's going to make take the top off of a defense. So because he can't do that, the Cowboys are going to have to address the receiver position. They've got to get younger. They've got to get more athletic. They've got to get faster. And so I think that they're going to be faced with the reality of doing something with this Dez Bryant contract. Whether it's a restructure or it's an outright release remains to be seen, but they're going to have to address it.
I think it's clear if they go to him and ask him to take a pay cut, he's going to be upset. And we know how temperamental he is. And he could just go into a shell. You could lose him, whatever. And then if you have to cut him, to your point, my problem is, who are you replacing him with?
Exactly.
I don't think, look, I think Dez, look, I'm speculating. I think there's a lot of false bravado coming from him. I think he knows he had a bad season. I think he hears everybody saying he's not the same. He's lost a step. Not just this year, but a couple past seasons. I think he's going to really come back and try to prove that he's still an elite receiver. And I'm not saying that'll get his speed back and all that, but he can catch the ball better. He can run sharper routes and things like that. So I almost feel like, look, you don't ask him to take that pay cut, because I think if they lose him, I don't see who you're replacing him with.
I think he would just flatly say no. It's a seller's market right now if you're a receiver. Like, okay, cut me. If you cut Dez Bryant, the best receiver on the free agent market becomes Dez Bryant. Even a lesser Dez Bryant, even a guy who I want to be clear on this, I've been critical of Dez. Dez has not lived up to the contract, or he hasn't played to the level that you would hope with the way he's been paid. It's been years since he was a consensus top 5 receiver. All that's true. But when the best free agent wide receiver is who? Terrell Pryor? We don't know what the Rams are going to do with Sammy Watkins. Jarvis Landry already got franchise tag.
But the Miami Dolphins are open for business there.
Yeah, but you would then have to give Jarvis Landry a big contract. Jarvis Landry is 8 yards per catch. He's not a take the top off the defense guy either. I do not think Dez Bryant is worth $16.5 million. But I do not think you can leave Dak Prescott in what is the now critical year of his career after a bad second season, after a great rookie season, saying, hey, your number one option is who? Bryce Butler, who's a free agent as well, a rookie wide receiver. We see rookie wide receivers every year go in the top 10 and struggle, and they don't have a top 10 pick. I think you can be critical of Dez, critical of the production, and also say, oddly enough, in this specific instance, he has a lot of the leverage on the Cowboys.
No, he does have a lot of leverage, but I think the Cowboys can be creative in terms of trying to find a replacement for Dez Bryant. One name you didn't mention was Allen Robinson. He looks like he's going to be on the free agent market. He might be an option. Coming off of an ACL, you might be able to convince him to take a team-friendly deal with a team that's going to be trying to make a push and make the playoffs this season. Also, the Dallas Cowboys, their first-round draft pick, it's not going to be a high pick because of where they are in the draft. They're in the late teens, I think it is. So when you start talking about options, maybe they shop that first-round pick around to a team that has a wide receiver that's on an expiring contract. Nice. Those are all options in terms of looking for a solution. But one thing that you can't do is sit pat at the wide receiver position with what you had from a year ago, because you saw that it just wasn't good enough.
Draft a wide receiver.
69 catches for 850 yards and 6 touchdowns. That ain't going to cut it.
I agree.
Not for $16.5 million.
You don't think he's capable of – I'm not even talking about getting back to what he was 4 years ago, but just improving significantly. You don't think he's capable of that anymore?
I don't see the physical skill set improving. And that's the problem, because when you start talking about Dez Bryant before, he was never a burner coming into the league, right? But he was that guy that you could throw the ball downfield and he was going to go up and get those 50-50 passes. He was going to come down with the football. He would dictate coverages. You would have to have a safety over the top. And that's what made the Dallas Cowboys offense so difficult to defend, because they had the power running game to go along with that wide receiver. So if you didn't have 8 guys in the box, they'd run the football down your throat. If you committed to having that 8th guy down in the box, then Dez Bryant would beat you one-on-one on the outside.
So you don't think Dez is going to be any better than what you saw last year? Even if he, like he said, I'm ready to put the work in and
I'm not saying Dez Bryant can't be more effective. I'm not saying that he can't be a solid possession receiver, because I still believe the ball skills are there. I just don't see the physical attributes that's commensurate with being a number one receiver.
And you don't think he can justify the $16.5 million, which is a huge part of it. I mentioned the cap before. The cap matters, and the Cowboys can, by cutting him, they could save $12.5 million this year, but then they would have $4 million against the cap in 2019.
They'd make it a post-June, right?
Right. Yeah. If they did that, basically cutting him, they have $8 million of Dez Bryant money that's going to go against their cap if they cut him, either all this year or over the next 2 years. So it's really, we say $16.5 million, but the spread between his cap hit and the dead money is $8.5 million. Can he be $8.5 million of production? Like, as bad as Dez was last year, he would have been the best wide receiver on the Giants. He would have been the best wide receiver on Washington. He would have been in the running for the best wide receiver on Philadelphia. Like, there is a degree of, we hold Dez Bryant to the standard of not only his pay rate, but where he was his third, fourth, and fifth years in the league when he accounted for, I think, a total of 42, average 1,400 yards and 12 touchdowns a season. He hasn't been close to that player anymore. If I'm Dallas, even if I keep Dez, I'm drafting a wide receiver or a pass-catching tight end in the first round. Like, they have a great offensive line. They have a great running back. We'll see what they have at quarterback because we've had signs from both sides. But their skill position guys on the outside, tight end and wide receiver, have been lacking, and that's even with Dez Bryant on the team.
We talked a little bit about the Kirk Cousins situation in Minnesota earlier. The Cowboys have the most valuable commodity in the NFL, which is a quarterback on a rookie contract. Of the starting quarterbacks, Dak Prescott is making what? The least amount of money. He's making like $660,000.
Yeah.
So you got to be able to capitalize on that while you don't have to pay him.
It's a great
So
point.
this is all about getting Dak Prescott back on track with putting the right skill position players around him. And that's why they have to improve the talent level at the receiver position. So even if they keep Dez Bryant, like you said, Nick, they're going to have to go out and get some other pieces.
I'm Jenna Wolf, and thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Make sure to subscribe and tell your friends, family, and coworkers about the podcast, which, by the way, is available on iTunes and all your favorite podcast apps. You can catch a fresh new episode every Monday through Friday on FS1, starting at 6:30 a.m. Eastern, 3:30 a.m. Pacific. So long, everyone.